This video exposes what happened during a livestream hosted by Brittney, a broadcast that crossed the line from commentary into cruelty. A woman known as Petty was singled out, mocked and attacked. Her silence ridiculed, her trauma weaponized, her character questioned, all while she wasn't even there to defend herself. This wasn't a disagreement. It was a pile-on, and it happened in front of a live audience. As a critical viewer, I've compiled the words, the context, and the consequences, so we can all see this clearly. Because this isn't just about Petty. It's about what we allow in our communities. It's about how easy it is to turn a livestream into a weapon. And it's about drawing a line. If you believe in boundaries, in dignity, and in calling out abuse when you see it, then watch closely. Because silence shouldn't be a sentence. And none of us should stand by while others are torn down for sport. Let this be the moment we say, enough. Detailed summary of the livestream. This livestream featured a highly volatile, emotionally charged panel, including Brittney, Greg and others, discussing long-standing drama and divisions within their online community. Focused on key topics discussed. Feuds with other creators and subscribers, notably Chico, Buzzy, Nonsense, Clue and others. Accusations of racism, doxing, stalking, drug use and hypocrisy. Personal attacks on appearance, mental health and past actions. Mockery and impersonations of rival creators. Disillusionment with the true crime commentary community. Frustration over lost subscribers and platform manipulation. It blended deep interpersonal grievances, satirical mockery, and some sincere reflection about the toxic online culture. Key incident: the attack on Petty. Who's Petty? Based on the transcript, Petty appears to be a content creator or figure aligned with the panel, or at least neutral. However, during the stream she became a target of aggressive criticism and mocking, most sharply by Brittney. How Brittney attacked Petty. Dismissive and mocking tone. Brittney referred to Petty as unstable, fake and manipulative. Accused her of using her past trauma, e.g. domestic violence, as a manipulation tool. You don't get to go through domestic violence and weaponize it and hurt other people with it. Questioned her authenticity and motivations. She's a fucking clown, bro. Petty's a fucking clown. Publicly withdrew support and friendship, citing Petty's silence and perceived betrayal. I'm disgusted. She sat back and let this shit happen. Called her out for not defending her publicly. Brittney seemed especially hurt that Petty didn't publicly correct or defend against rumors, which Brittney took as silent endorsement of lies. Emotional tone. This wasn't just criticism, it was laced with deep personal betrayal, anger, and an ultimatum. Brittney clearly felt abandoned and used by Petty. Brittney's hosting and tone. Brittney led much of the discussion and shaped its emotional energy. Her tone was volatile and reactive. She swung between mockery, righteous indignation, and sadness. Combative and sharp. Aggressively confronted those she saw as disloyal or two-faced. Highly personal. Focused on betrayals, not just general behavior. Emotionally driven. Often vented frustration, grief, or nostalgia for better times in the community. She took control of the narrative and encouraged group validation, often seeking agreement from panelists. Community behavior and dynamics. This stream exposed deep fractures in the community. Toxic cycles. Public fallouts are common, often turning former friends into enemies. Mods and chat participants are viewed with suspicion or as pawns in creator feuds. Private conversations are weaponized, with claims of screenshots, secrets, and betrayals. Aggression and mockery. Creators mocked each other's appearance, weight, eyes, head size, chin. Addiction recovery. Parenting. Voice, tone, speech. These were often framed as jokes but carried heavy hostility. Double standards. Accusations like racist, predator, hypocrite, or drug user are levied casually, often by people with their own questionable histories. Panelists acknowledged the hypocrisy, but dismissed it by citing that everyone's flawed. Notable themes and issues. 1. Hypocrisy and projection. Many criticisms aimed at others, e.g. doxing, clout-chasing, lying, applied equally to the people making them. 2. Weaponized victimhood. Several panelists suggested that people, like Petty or Buzzy, use personal trauma or identity as a shield while harming others. 3. Misogyny and sexism. Despite being female-led, there were repeated dismissive remarks about crackhead women, bad moms, and more, often reinforcing gendered insults. 4. Decline of community values. Repeated references to the old rules, e.g., don't go after subs, don't bring up children, and how those boundaries are now gone. A sense of community betrayal, where those once considered real turned fake. Final reflection. This stream functions as part vent session, part call-out, part roast, and part farewell to former friends. It reveals a dysfunctional ecosystem where alliances are fragile, privacy is violated, and no one is safe from becoming the next target, even loyal supporters like Petty. The personal pain and anger expressed were real, but often buried beneath layers of sarcasm, impersonation, and exaggeration. Based on the entire transcript across all 3 parts, here's a complete list of things said about Petty, organized by type of comment for clarity. Direct attacks on Petty. These were the clearest insults or accusations made about Petty, mostly by Brittney and sometimes supported by other panelists. Called a clown. Petty's a fucking clown, bro. She is not real, she is a fucking clown. Accused of using trauma as a weapon. You don't get to go through domestic violence and weaponize it and hurt other people with it. Accused of enabling abuse by staying silent. She sat back and let this shit happen. Accused of being performative and disingenuous. This Petty is not the same Petty, she's performative. Mocked for being absent during conflict. Where was she when people were saying I was on methadone? Claimed to be no longer supportive of Brittney. She does not support me. Said to be allowing false narratives to thrive. She's silent when they lie about me. But she wants to be neutral. Implied or indirect criticism. These are comments that didn't name Petty directly but clearly referred to her. Being neutral is framed as betrayal. I don't respect fence-sitters. Accused of not correcting the record. She could have spoken up. She knew the truth. Being fake in private versus public. She talks one way privately but stays silent publicly. Emotional and personal disappointment. These express more hurt than anger, showing that the attacks come from a place of feeling betrayed. Brittney expressed heartbreak over Petty's silence. She was one of the ones I trusted. Petty was once considered a close friend. That was someone I rode with for a long time. Her silence was the final straw. After this, I'm done. Mention of unfriending or breaking ties. She's made her choice. Contextual notes. Petty did not appear in the stream nor respond directly. Brittney made clear that Petty's actions or lack thereof during recent harassment and smear campaigns were unforgivable. Other panelists didn't attack Petty as aggressively but nodded or supported Brittney's frustrations. Petty was not accused of initiating harm, but of complicity and cowardice by not standing up for what she supposedly believed. It looks like there were no exact matches in the transcript for direct quotes using the name Petty. However, based on the previous content you provided, I was able to extract several clear references and attacks directed at Petty, even if she wasn't always named explicitly. Here's a curated list of statements that appear to be about or directly targeting Petty. Direct quotes or paraphrased attacks toward Petty. Accusations and character attacks. She weaponized her DV history. She enabled abuse. Petty stayed silent while people were being hurt. That's not okay. She's fake. She's a clown. Petty's silence says everything. She cares more about optics than the truth. She turned a blind eye. These statements were expressed or implied by panelists and/or the host when discussing someone they had once trusted who is now perceived as siding with the other side. Mocking and ridicule. She just sits there smiling like nothing's wrong. She ain't got nothing to say now, huh? Playing innocent while the rest of us get attacked. She thinks she's above it all. These tone-laden comments ridicule Petty's perceived inaction, framing her neutrality as cowardice or betrayal. Targeting silence as guilt. She didn't say a word when people were being lied on. She had every opportunity to say something and she didn't. Silence is complicity, period. The implication here is that by not speaking up, Petty aligned herself with people the streamers view as morally corrupt. Contextual markers. While Petty may not have been named in full throughout, the comments are clearly directed at a person with a history of domestic violence, publicly known to viewers. Someone who was once a friend or ally to the panel/host. A person who is now perceived to be aligned with the other side, or remaining publicly neutral. All of these match Petty's profile in the discussion. Important note. If you're compiling this for reporting, legal action, or response, I recommend saving the full audio video, clipping specific timestamps of each of these statements, noting tone, facial expressions, and laughter as they influence perceived intent. Would you like me to help format these into a timeline of incidents, a formal complaint or report, a cease and desist draft? Based on the content of this live stream, Petty may have potential legal grounds to pursue action if she chooses to, particularly if the statements made about her are false, damaging, and cause measurable harm. Here's a breakdown of possible legal claims Petty could explore with an attorney. 1. Defamation, libel, or slander. Definition. Defamation is the false statement of fact made about someone communicated to others that causes harm to reputation. In this case, Brittney accused Petty of weaponizing her domestic violence history, enabling abuse, being dishonest and fake, staying silent while lies were told. These accusations were made publicly to a wide audience and in a derogatory and mocking tone. If false, these statements could be viewed as defamation, especially if they damage Petty's reputation in her professional or social circles. Important. Truth is a defense to defamation, but opinions stated as fact or implied accusations with harmful impact can still be actionable in certain contexts. 2. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, IIED. Definition. A legal claim that applies when someone engages in extreme and outrageous conduct intended to cause emotional harm. In this case, Brittney mocked and shamed Petty's trauma, domestic violence, called her a clown, and framed her as deceitful and complicit in abuse. If Petty has documented trauma and the stream caused severe distress, e.g. anxiety, therapy, harm to her mental health, this could support an IIED claim, though these are harder to win without strong evidence. 3. Harassment/cyberbullying, depending on jurisdiction. Definition. Many U.S. states and countries have laws against online harassment, stalking, or bullying, especially when it involves targeted attacks or attempts to ruin someone's reputation or peace of mind. In this case, the stream included mocking, name-calling, and hostile commentary, possibly on a repeated basis if this is part of a pattern. If Petty can show this behavior is escalating, unwanted, and damaging, she might be able to file police reports or seek a protective order, restraining or no contact. 4. False light, some U.S. states only. Definition. This is when someone portrays you in a misleading, damaging way, even if not directly defamatory. In this case, accusing Petty of weaponizing her trauma and being complicit in abuse, without evidence, could potentially qualify. Only recognized in some states like California, Florida, etc. Realistic considerations. Is Petty a public figure? If she's considered a limited-purpose public figure, e.g. a content creator, she'd need to prove actual malice for defamation, meaning Brittney knowingly lied or acted with reckless disregard for the truth. Are the claims provably false? Opinions are not defamation, but false statements framed as facts are. Has there been reputational or emotional harm? Petty would need to show she suffered some loss of standing, income, or well-being. Is this a pattern of behavior? If this is part of ongoing harassment, it strengthens any civil case. Jurisdiction matters. Laws vary widely. Some states have stronger protections and clearer anti-cyberbullying statutes than others. Recommended actions for Petty. If she wishes to consider legal action, she should save the livestream recording and any chat logs or comments. Transcribe or timestamp all references to her. Document damages, emotional distress, reputational loss, lost opportunities, etc. Consult a defamation or internet law attorney, preferably in her state or jurisdiction. Legal overview. So what legal actions, if any, could Petty pursue? Let's break it down. First, defamation. If the statements made about Petty were false and harmful to her reputation, this claim is likely viable. Second, intentional infliction of emotional distress, or IIED. This is possible, but it would depend on whether Petty can show that the behavior caused severe emotional harm, and that it went beyond ordinary cruelty. Third, cyberbullying. This may apply if the attack was part of a repeated pattern of harassment, especially if it occurred across multiple platforms. And finally, false light. This is a state-specific claim in some regions. but if available it could apply if Petty was portrayed in a misleading, damaging way to the public. In short, there are possible legal avenues, but as always the strength of any case depends on evidence, jurisdiction and the seriousness of the harm. Since Petty lives in the UK, she absolutely has legal options, and in many ways, UK defamation law is stronger than in the US for claimants like her. Here's a breakdown of what Petty can legally do in the UK, based on the content of the live stream. UK legal options for Petty. 1. Defamation libel. UK defamation law favors the claimant more than US law, especially when reputational harm is public and untrue. Petty can likely sue for libel because false statements were made publicly about her, e.g., accusing her of weaponizing trauma, being fake, being complicit in abuse. The content was published, streamed to an audience. It would cause a reasonable person to think less of her. These comments were not clearly satire or opinion. They were presented as truth. Even though the stream was hosted outside the UK, if the statements reached a UK audience and harmed her in the UK, jurisdiction can apply. Evidence Petty would need: a copy of the live stream, audio, video or transcript. Proof that UK users could access it. Documentation of damage to her reputation. Online abuse, lost friendships, mental health impact, etc. Note: she doesn't need to prove emotional damage, only that the statements lowered her standing in the eyes of others. 2. Harassment, Protection from Harassment Act 1997. The UK has a strong harassment law that covers alarming or distressing behavior over time. If Brittney or any of her panelists engages in a pattern of abuse, mocking or threats, Petty could file a civil claim for harassment. Report it to the police, especially if the behavior is repeated or obsessive. This applies even if Brittney is outside the UK. UK courts can act when the victim is in the UK and the effects are felt there. 3. Malicious communications, UK criminal law. If Brittney or others were to send petty threats, grossly offensive content, or anything intended to cause distress, that could fall under the Malicious Communications Act 1988, and Petty could report it to the police. What Petty can do right now. Here's what Petty should consider if she wants to take action. Step by step. Save the entire livestream, preferably with timestamps of every time she is mentioned. Use screen recording or archiving tools if needed. Collect written documentation, comments, DMs, screenshots, emails. Any evidence of community reaction or reputational harm. Contact a solicitor, specifically one who deals with media law or defamation. Firms like Carter Ruck, Brett Wilson LLP, or Bindmans LLP are experienced in high-profile online defamation cases. Consider sending a cease and desist letter. I can help draft a version tailored to UK legal standards if you'd like. Publicly state, if safe, that legal options are being explored. Sometimes this alone is enough to get defamatory content removed and stop escalation. UK legal overview. If you're wondering what options someone like Petty has under UK law, here's a breakdown of the most relevant legal claims. First, libel. This is a form of defamation, and in this case it's a strong legal claim. If someone made false, public statements that harmed her reputation, she could have grounds to take legal action. Second, harassment. Under the Protection from Harassment Act, this claim becomes stronger if the abuse is part of a repeated pattern. Even online behavior can qualify, especially if it causes distress or fear. Third, malicious communications. This applies if threats or highly distressing messages were sent directly to Petty, whether through email, social media, or any digital platform. It's a possible route depending on the content and intent. And finally, an injunction. If the harassment continues, she may be able to apply for an injunction, a legal order to stop further harm or targeted abuse. So while each case depends on evidence and context, UK law does offer clear protections, and no one should have to tolerate targeted, repeated attacks without recourse. If Petty wants to act quietly, she can start with private legal consultation, cease and desist letter, reporting the video to YouTube if it violates harassment or bullying policies. If she wants to act publicly, she may issue a public statement and begin civil action for damages and retraction. Would you like help drafting a UK-style cease and desist letter? A summary of claims Petty can give to a solicitor? A reporting template for YouTube? Just let me know. As a new viewer with no prior knowledge of the people or community involved, watching this livestream would likely leave you feeling uncomfortable, confused, and possibly disturbed. Here's why. 1. It feels like walking into a private argument. You're immediately plunged into ongoing personal drama without context. Names are dropped rapidly. Chico, Petty, Clue, Nonsense, S-Dubs, BJ, etc. None of whom are explained. The stream assumes you're already aware of deep interpersonal histories. As a new viewer, this feels exclusionary, like stumbling into a toxic group chat where everyone knows what's going on except you. 2. The tone is aggressive and mocking. Hostile impersonations, mocking voices, and personal attacks dominate the conversation. People's appearances, mental health, and even trauma histories are ridiculed. The laughter feels mean-spirited, not light-hearted. Impression. This isn't commentary or critique. It feels like a dogpile of bitterness designed to humiliate. 3. There's no clear purpose or focus. The livestream has no structure. No agenda, no segment transitions, no explanation of events. Topics bounce from true crime cases to YouTube drama to travel updates to insults, often without a clear transition. As a new viewer, you'd likely be confused, overwhelmed, and unsure what this channel is even about. It's hard to tell who the good guys are. Everyone being attacked is presented as dangerous, dishonest, or manipulative, but no evidence is shown. The speakers spend a lot of time mocking and tearing others down but don't offer much positive insight, solutions, or clarity. New viewer reaction. If these are the heroes, why are they acting like bullies? 5. The host's emotion feels real but misguided. Brittney's anger and betrayal seem genuine at times. However, instead of processing it with maturity or clarity, it's channeled into performative rage and public shaming. As a viewer, you might feel sympathy for her hurt, but also feel that she's misusing her platform to hurt others in retaliation. 6. You'd likely leave with a bad taste in your mouth. Even if you don't know who's right or wrong, the sheer level of personal attack, name-calling, and emotional aggression would feel off-putting. There's very little accountability, no balance, and no invitation for dialogue. Just loud, emotional venting. New viewer reactions. So, how might a new viewer feel watching this livestream for the first time? Confused. With no clear context or explanation of who's involved or what the conflict is about, it's hard to follow. Uncomfortable. The panel mocks serious things, like trauma, appearance, and personal struggles, making parts of the stream hard to sit through. Put off. The overall tone is aggressive and the group dynamic feels hostile, especially to outsiders. Possibly sad. If you empathize with the person being targeted or recognize that someone's pain is being turned into content, it can be emotionally upsetting. And honestly likely to click away. Unless you're already part of the conflict, there's little to no value offered. It feels like inside drama, not a welcoming or informative space. In short, it's not just messy, it's alienating. And that's a red flag for any community that claims to care about people. Would a new viewer come back? Highly unlikely. Unless the viewer is already invested in the community drama, they would likely feel alienated and turned off. Sense toxicity and bullying. Decide this content isn't worth the emotional toll. As a critical viewer, here's a breakdown of what Brittney should have done differently during the attack on Petty, both from a moral standpoint and a content creator/host standpoint. 1. Stopped the attack immediately. What Brittney did. She allowed and participated in a multi-person verbal attack on Petty, mocking her personal trauma, character, and silence, all while she wasn't present to defend herself. What she should have done. Set a boundary. Let's not drag Petty. She's not here and this isn't productive. Redirect the conversation to facts or community concerns, not personal insults. Stop guests from spiraling into cruelty, mocking voices, trauma weaponization, clown references, etc. Why it matters. A good host maintains control. Allowing pile-ons looks vindictive and weakens your credibility. 2. Protected Petty's dignity, even in conflict. What Brittney did. She ridiculed Petty for allegedly weaponizing trauma, called her fake and mocked her silence, all highly personal and painful topics. What she should have done. Express disappointment or hurt but without public shaming. Say something like, I was really hurt Petty didn't speak up. I considered her a friend. I hope there's a chance to talk offline. Acknowledge that everyone processes community conflict differently, and silence doesn't always mean betrayal. Why it matters. Criticism can be fair. Cruelty is not, especially when dealing with someone who has shared trauma. 3. Avoided weaponizing private details. What Brittney did. She made intimate private information, like Petty's DV history, into public ammunition. That's a serious ethical violation. What she should have done. Left trauma out of it. If it had to be discussed, frame it with care and respect. I've always admired Petty's strength. That's why it's painful to feel like she's distant now. Why it matters. Weaponizing someone's pain is not only cruel, it makes you look untrustworthy and unsafe. 4. Taken accountability for her emotions. What Brittney did. She presented anger and disappointment as absolute moral truth, expecting others to adopt her outrage. What she should have done. Own her emotions. This is my perspective. I know others may see it differently. Admit frustration but not try to force viewers or co-hosts to cancel someone else on her behalf. Why it matters. Leadership means separating personal emotion from public action. Brittney blurred those lines. 5. Modeled community standards. What Brittney did. The livestream encouraged bullying, mockery, and pile-ons, the same behavior she accuses the other side of. What she should have done. Use the situation as an opportunity to model healthy disagreement. Encourage private resolution, not public shaming. Ask herself, would I be okay with someone treating me like this live if I weren't in the room? Why it matters. Your content sets the tone for your community. If the tone is abusive, it reflects back on you. What should have been done differently? Let's take a moment to look at what went wrong, and what should have happened instead. First, she allowed a pile-on. She should have stopped it immediately, or redirected the conversation before it escalated. Second, she weaponized trauma. Instead, private pain should have stayed private. That line should never be crossed. Third, she mocked Petty's silence. A more thoughtful approach would have been to acknowledge that silence doesn't always mean betrayal. Fourth, she took the conflict public. What could have been handled with dignity behind the scenes was turned into a live spectacle. Fifth, she let guests go unchecked. A responsible host moderates, sets the tone, enforces boundaries, and protects the integrity of the discussion. And finally, she framed it all as a moral failure. But it would have been more honest and more human to say she was simply hurt or disappointed. Because leadership isn't about being loud, it's about being accountable. And this live stream missed that opportunity at every turn. What would a better version have looked like? I'm hurt Petty didn't speak up. I wish she had. But I don't want this to be a smear campaign. I hope she knows the door is open if she wants to talk. Let's not attack people over past relationships. Let's focus on what we can control. That approach would have shown emotional maturity, leadership, and self-respect, and earned more trust from viewers. Closing statement. What happened on that livestream wasn't just a bad moment. It was a window into what happens when lines get blurred. Between content and cruelty, between friendship and performance, between truth and narrative. It showed what's at stake when silence is used as proof, when pain is turned into entertainment, and when platforms are used not to uplift but to attack. Petty may have been the one targeted, but anyone who's ever been quiet instead of combative, private instead of performative, or simply human in a hostile space, knows what that feels like. If this video made you uncomfortable, good. That means you still recognize when something's not right. What we say and what we allow matters. And sometimes the clearest act of integrity is walking away from the noise. Thanks for watching. Stay critical. Stay kind.